In the early 19th century, slavery in Jamaica is no longer defended only by force. It is also defended by argument. Planters describe themselves as guardians of order and providers of work. Colonial officials describe the island as stable and productive. Both claims depend on the idea that enslaved people can be governed without becoming politically aware. Religion and education enter this system not as neutral forces, but as tools that can either reinforce obedience or undermine it. Missionaries arrive with the intention of saving souls, but they operate inside a plantation society that measures all activity by its effect on labor and control. Chapels are built near estates. Preaching is allowed where it does not interfere with work schedules. Conversion is encouraged when it appears to promote submission and patience. Christianity is tolerated as long as it does not create organization outside plantation authority. The plantation system depends on separating people from independent sources of meaning. Work routines define time. Punishment defines consequence. Family life is fragile and easily broken. Religious instruction introduces a new schedule and a new form of authority. Sermons gather people in groups. Hymns teach collective rhythm. Prayer meetings create moments outside labor discipline. These activities are permitted at first because they appear harmless and because they are supervised by Europeans. Literacy increases the political weight of religion. Teaching enslaved people to read allows access to scripture without mediation. Words no longer pass only through overseers and drivers. Written text introduces permanence. A message can be repeated exactly. A rule can be compared with another rule. This does not create rebellion by itself. It creates a standard against which authority can be judged. Missionaries do not preach revolt. They preach obedience to God, discipline of the body, and moral reform. But they also preach that all people are equal before divine law. They preach marriage as binding. They preach the dignity of labor without the legitimacy of ownership. These ideas do not attack slavery directly, but they change how enslaved people interpret it. Punishment becomes sin rather than fate. Separation becomes injustice rather than routine. Planters initially see value in this. A Christian workforce is expected to be sober, less violent, and easier to manage. Baptism is treated as proof of improvement. Missionaries are allowed to teach reading because it appears to strengthen religious feeling. For a time, religion is absorbed into the plantation system as another form of discipline. This balance does not last. Missionaries become witnesses to abuse. They hear complaints during confession and prayer meetings. They record marriages that plantations ignore. They write letters to Britain describing conditions that planters present as normal. Their reports do not remain private. They circulate through abolitionist networks and parliamentary debates. Information leaves the island in written form. Literacy increases the speed of this process. Enslaved people learn to write letters and petitions. News from Britain is read aloud in chapels. Laws about emancipation are discussed before they are enforced. Rumor and scripture mix with official proclamations. Knowledge begins to move faster than authority can manage. Planters interpret this shift as interference. Missionaries are accused of weakening discipline by teaching equality. Literacy is blamed for spreading discontent. Chapels are seen as meeting places rather than churches. Religion is redefined from moral instruction into political influence. Colonial governments respond by attempting to regulate belief. Missionaries are licensed. Teaching is restricted. Night meetings are limited. Laws are passed to control preaching to slaves. These measures do not remove religion. They redefine it as a security issue. The contradiction becomes visible. Christianity is supposed to produce obedience, but it also produces connection. It links estates through shared worship. It links Jamaica to Britain through correspondence. It links personal suffering to public language. The plantation depends on isolation. Religion produces networks. The tension reaches a peak during moments of unrest. When strikes, slowdowns, or uprisings occur, missionaries are blamed for having prepared minds. Literacy is blamed for having spread ideas. Even when missionaries oppose violence, their presence is treated as causal. They become symbols of outside influence inside a closed system. At the same time, enslaved people use religion strategically. Baptism can protect against sale. Marriage can slow separation. Literacy can provide small advantages in work assignments. Prayer meetings can serve as spaces for planning and mutual aid. None of this requires open rebellion. It changes the terms of survival. For the colonial state, the problem is not belief itself, but loss of monopoly over meaning. When authority explains the world, obedience follows. When scripture explains the world, authority competes. The question is no longer only who controls bodies, but who defines right and wrong. By the 1820s and 1830s, this struggle becomes public. Missionaries testified before Parliament. Planters publish rebuttals. Jamaica becomes an argument as much as a colony. Control of narrative becomes as important as control of land. The plantation system responds by hardening its position. Discipline increases, restrictions tighten. Religious activity is watched more closely. This confirms the fears that produced reform movements in Britain. Pressure builds from outside as resistance grows inside. Religion does not free enslaved people by itself. Literacy does not dismantle the plantation, but both alter the balance of power. They shift control from physical routines to contested meanings. They turn obedience into a question rather than a condition. In this way, missionaries and schools become part of the political structure of slavery. They do not sit outside it. They operate within it and against it at the same time. The plantation becomes a place where labor, belief, and authority intersect. By the time emancipation approaches, Jamaica is no longer governed only by whips and patrols. It is governed by sermons, letters, and laws written far from the cane fields. Religion has become a weapon, not because it was designed to be one, but because it introduced language that the plantation could not fully control. Slavery does not collapse when people learn to read or pray. It weakens when control over interpretation breaks. The system remains intact, but its certainty erodes. Jamaica enters the final years of slavery, governed by force, watched by missionaries, and judged by a public that no longer accepts silence as stability.